The last one that I did just a couple seconds ago actually was the uh, a rendition that I do every year of American Pie, it being February 3rd, which is when the plane crash happened that killed Buddy Holly, Richie Valens, and the Big Bopper. Now, I do want to point out one thing too that I forgot to mention in the video, but it ended up killing those three, but also on that tour was Waylon Jennings, and he opted to take the bus. And so instead of one of those three, it could have been Waylon Jennings. Um, so that, I mean, just either way, just a ridiculous loss for the music community, and continues to be because the Beatles were very heavily influenced um, by the Crickets. In fact, their name was taken from the Crickets, the Beatles and the Crickets, and they liked names that had two meanings, so they changed it to Beat, as in Beatles, and Crickets. The Cricket was obviously the name of the band, the insect, and then also the sport of cricket. Like I said, Buddy Holly just tremendously influential. And Bob Dylan, even my guy, saw them on that tour, and he said it was unlike anything that I had ever seen before. And I think he even said that Buddy Holly transcended something to him. I guess we have Buddy Holly to thank for Dylan's phenomenal musicianship. But this was famously talked about in American Pie, the song by Don McLean, which was released in 1971. But the event happened when he was, I believe, 8 years old, and wrote about it years later. So we're actually going to break this down pretty line by line. So stick with me, and we'll chat about that. So a long, long time ago, I can still remember. So, like I said, he was 8 years old, and he really liked that music. So, how the music used to make me smile. Um, and, wanted to be a musician. If he had his chance, he could make those people dance, and maybe they'd be happy for a while. But then what happened? February made me shiver. So that's a reference to the 3rd of February. With every paper I delivered, he used to be a paper delivery boy as a kid. Bad news on the doorstep. I couldn't take one more step, so it couldn't bring himself to deliver the news to people. And then I can't remember if I cried when I read about his widowed bride. That's pretty straightforward, but it's in reference to Buddy Holly's uh, widow, and they had just had a child, if I'm not mistaken, or she was pregnant at the time. Um, so all of these things are very American. And so that's kind of the idea of Miss American Pie, a Chevy driving it to the levee. The levee was dry, there was no more good music. And then the good old boys. I think that's a reference to just the good old boys never did no harm. But I could be wrong about that one. And a lot of this stuff, by the way, is purely speculative, but there are a lot of clues that tip us off to, okay, this is probably what he was talking about. So the Book of Love, obviously, did you write the Book of Love? It's referring to the Bible, faith in God above, if the Bible tells you so. Rock and roll, can music save your mortal soul? And that's actually kind of a push and pull, because a lot of people thought that rock and roll was the devil's music. And then slow dancing, it was very big. Proms, same thing. I know that you're in love with him because I saw you dancing in the gym. The lonely teenage Bronco buck with the pink carnation in a pickup truck. Just that image of, driving his date to the dance or whatever. But you couldn't, because the music had died. So then you go back to the chorus. So for 10 years, we've been on our own. This is a reference to the fact that he was, or that it happened, I should say, in 1989 and 1989, 1959, and he started writing it 1 year later in 1969. Moss grows fat on a Rolling Stone, probably a reference to the Rolling Stones, could be like a Rolling Stone. Um, but that's not how it used to be. And this is where I think that it's probably a reference to like a Rolling Stone because the jester sang for the king and queen. So I'm not sure who the queen would be, maybe Priscilla, but the king would be Elvis. And the jester would be the one and only Bob Dylan, and singing for them. It should be pointed out that Dylan was also very heavily influenced by Elvis, but kind of the transition away from rock and roll and into the singer songwriter realm, because in a code he borrowed from James Dean, so that's going from the crooner to the songwriter, and a voice that came from you and me. That's almost certainly about Dylan because he, is not exactly known for his voice, but it could have come from any of us, because it's his natural voice. So then it goes on to say, and while the king was looking down, the jester stole his thorny crown. So that's your big tip off to, okay, this is, going from rock and roll to folk rock and the singer songwriter realm. Um, the courtroom was adjourned and no verdict was returned. So is rock and roll really dead? That's the no verdict was returned. Well, Lennon read a book on Marx. So that's talking about John Lennon in all likelihood, and kind of some of his more communist ways, quote unquote. The quartet, that would be obviously the Beatles, practiced in the park and we sang dirges in the dark. I believe that has to do with some sort of Beatles concert in a park. That's my understanding of it. So helter skelter, in a summer swelter, birds flew off of with a fallout shelter, 8 miles high and falling fast. So that's 8 miles high. The bird's song landed foul on the grass, and the players tried for a forward pass with the jester on the sideline in a cast. Now I'll get to the landed foul on the grass in just a second, but the jester, once again, Bob Dylan, and probably a reference. So we're up to about 1966, and this is probably a reference to his motorcycle accident that sidelined him for a handful of years. And the halftime was Sweet Perfume, probably a reference to weed. The Sergeants played a marching tune. So now we're up to 1967 with Sergeant Pepper, and the Sergeants, once again, being the Beatles. We all got up to dance, but we never got the chance. Now, that might be a reference to the fact that the Beatles stopped touring in, I believe it was 66. And so we all wanted to dance, but wait, they stopped touring, they became the studio band, and that's what led them to Sergeant Pepper. So that is probably what that is a reference to. The players tried to take the field, the marching band refused to yield. That probably has to do with the protests of the 60s, with the Vietnam War. And so the, marching band, that's the people marching, protesting, and then the players trying to take the field, that's the cops. But it didn't always work to just, hey, let's arrest everybody. Some things never change. But that is that. And then there we were all in one place, a generation lost in space with no time left to start again. The space race, the Kennedy assassination, right? We were lost in space without the guy who tried to lead us there, right? So we skip around a little bit in all likelihood because Jack be nimble, Jack be quick, Jack Flash sat on a candlestick because fire is the devil's only friend. Now, this is probably a reference to the killing at Altamont, the raceway where the Rolling Stones were playing. Jack Flash being Mick Jagger, them kind of being the bad boys, the anti Beatles, who we talked about earlier. And then as I watched him on the stage, my hands were clenched in fists of rage. So at the Stones or Mick Jagger, no angel born in hell could break that Satan's spell, and that is a reference to Hell's Angels, who initiated this killing. The flames climbed high into the night to light the sacrificial rite. I saw Satan laughing with delight the day the music died. Again, maybe bringing back in that devil's music, but some people were leaning straight into that, which is the Rolling Stones. So then we get to the last verse, and like the first verse, it's just the piano in there. And there's a lot going on in here. So keep in mind, this is 1971, right around the time when Janis Joplin died. So I met a girl who sang the blues, probably Janis Joplin. I asked her for some happy news, but she just smiled and turned away. A lot of promise, but gone too soon. So I went down to the Sacred Store where I'd heard the music years before, but the man there said the music wouldn't play. I believe that is a reference to the Fillmore East, because that closed down in, I believe, 1971, maybe somewhere around there. And so that's that. It's either the East or the West, but I'm thinking it's the Fillmore East. But the man there said the music wouldn't play again, so that's them closing down the Fillmore. So then we jump back a little bit. So in the streets, the children screamed, the lovers cried, and the poets dreamed, but not a word was spoken. The church bells all were broken. So this is where we jump back. The three men I admire most, the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost, they caught the last train for the coast the day the music died. And I'm thinking probably what those are references to are the assassinations of JFK, Bobby Kennedy, and Martin Luther King, all within the '60s. Catching the last train for the coast that same, when they passed away, went to heaven or wherever. Probably heaven is what he's thinking of. Um, but then it goes to the chorus again twice, and that closes out the song. So again, all of this is purely speculative, but not necessarily fully on my end. There are musical scholars who, not that I'm not a musical scholar, but trained musical scholars, formally trained, who have kind of made these inferences. Don McLean's an artist, and so he doesn't always want people knowing the true intentions of the song. In fact, somebody asked him, what American Pie means to him, and he jokingly said it means I never have to work again. Um, but like I said, one of the most poetic songs, a lot of little hidden references, which I absolutely love. I try to do that in my songs as well. Um, and like I said, that's just one of those things. So interestingly enough, just a little bit of info about this song. So it was kind of a big deal when All Too Well by Taylor Swift went to number one a couple of years ago. And it was like a 10-minute version of the song or something. And when it went to number one, she sent Don McLean flowers because she thought, oh, yeah, that was the last song that was over 10 minutes or over a certain length. It was actually like 8.5 minutes or so. American Pie was, but over a certain length to go to number one. And actually, she was wrong because Murder Most Foul by Bob Dylan actually went to number one in 2020, shortly before hers did. So, I don't know where Bob Dylan's flowers are, but Taylor Swift certainly didn't send him any. But the reason why I bring up Murder Most Foul is not fully to rib Taylor Swift for that lapse in judgment, but Murder Most Foul is the closest thing that we have to another American Pie, and that centers around the Kennedy assassination, JFK, that is, and just kind of everything after that. But it's a lot darker than American Pie. So all that to say, just an absolutely beautiful piece of work that American Pie is. I have also been described as a beautiful piece of work, maybe without the beautiful part, but that's just one of those things. So we mourn on February 3rd. It's a commemoration, not a celebration, other than being a celebration of just how much. Um, Buddy Holly, Richie Valens, and the Big Bopper meant to the music community and continue to mean to the music community. And American Pie does a great job of breaking down all of those things of this, everything goes wrong and it's back to this one central idea of the day the music died. So, you go forward, you go backward, but you never forget, that particular day in music history. So, thank you for coming with me on this particular journey. As always, I am Minnesota Mike. Thank you so much for listening. I am, in addition to being on YouTube, I'm on Spotify, iTunes, all your favorite streaming platforms. And I am on Facebook and Instagram as well, also as Minnesota Mike. Thank you so much.